What's up YouTube? Welcome back to the shop. I am sort of on a box kick. I'd like to make a fancy houndstooth pattern box. It's gonna be classy. And I really want that pattern to pop. So I'm gonna use walnut and maple to do the pattern. Walnut, not much of an issue. Maple on the other hand, the majority of the material that I use comes from slabs, and I always have slabs in various stages of drying. Of course, the dry maple slabs are on the bottom of the pile, so I'll have to dig one of those out. I cut a bunch of maple and walnut strips and let it acclimate to the shop for a while. So now I need to mill them down to their final size. And I really need 4 different types of boards here. I need to have maple boards and walnut boards, but then I need to have thin maple strips and thin walnut strips, probably like 1/8 of an inch thick. And then whenever I mix those up, magically it becomes houndstooth. If you really want all the juicy details on how to make a houndstooth pattern, I did make a houndstooth ingrain cutting board, so you can always watch that video. The intro is a bit long, that kind of sucks. But it involves holograms, which are cool. So, you win some, you lose some. While the stripes are drying for our pattern, I'm gonna go ahead and start working on the body of the box. And I found this gnarly piece of walnut here. And when it comes to walnut, the gnarlier, the better it seems. I think there might be some really decent figure underneath all this. And if I mill it up and there isn't, I'll find another board somewhere and figure it out. Now I went back and forth on what to do with this because the lid of the box is gonna be that houndstooth. So then would the body be walnut and then the maple of that pattern pop? Or should the body be maple and the walnut of the pattern pop? I'm gonna go walnut. I don't know there's a wrong answer, but let me know in the comment section below. Would you have preferred a maple box with the pattern or a walnut box with the pattern? I took my stripes out of the clamps this morning, went ahead and remilled those up, and then I had to cut them so that the stripes are at an angle. To do that, I used the table saw. I turned my saw blade to 45 degrees, cut one side of my strip, then moved my blade back to 90 degrees, cut the other sides of my strip, and what I'm left with is strips that have diagonal stripes down them. I went ahead and milled up maple and walnut boards and cut those into strips that are the same size as my stripes. So now I'm left with 2 panels to glue up. I need to glue up one that has maple and stripes alternating, and then another pattern that has walnut and stripes that are alternating. Once those are dry, we'll cut all those up, mix them together, then we will have our final houndstooth pattern. I'm gonna try to glue these up together, but in the same jig. I think they're tiny enough that I can pull this off. This is by far the tiniest pattern I've ever glued up. It is definitely a challenge, and that's what I like about this project. Really want to push my skills on this one. I'm going to use a caul here to press from the outside. But more importantly, I took this piece of particle board and I wrapped it with some wax paper. And that's what's going to keep everything flat. Otherwise, this whole thing could just lift right off of the table. I cut our 2 panels into strips, and whenever I put those strips together, I can finally see our houndstooth pattern. And I love it. I think it looks really cool. So now it's time to glue all of this together. And to do that, I'm gonna use high glue. High glue just has a much longer open time than many other glues, so I won't feel as rushed. I'm going super slow with this, but it is difficult to line up all these squares. I'm doing my best. When you have such a small pattern, it's easy to make a mistake. One good thing about using high glue for an application like this, besides the long open time, is that it is super duper sticky. So after I get my pieces in place, they'll kind of stick to where I want them to be, and they're less likely to shift around whenever I apply cauls, because I'm gonna want to put a caul across the front of this like I did with the other 2 panels, and also put a board across the top, covered with wax paper, to make sure everything is as flat as possible. And when you apply all that clamping pressure, it is possible for some of these rows to shift a bit, which we don't want. I'm gonna do my best to apply even clamping pressure and do it as slow as possible, so nothing wiggles on me. After all that hard work, it is finally time to reveal our pattern. And it looks phenomenal. Yes, it looks so good. I love it. Nice tight pattern. You want to see something really cool? Put a dime next to it, just for scale, and you can see just how small all these little blocks are. They are really tiny, and this is by far the smallest pattern I've ever made. Now I know some of you are saying, you did all of that work just for that? Yes. But we're not done yet. I mean, we kind of are, but we're not. We finished the pattern, that part's done, but we're not done making the lid. I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna resaw it on the bandsaw, so I have 2 pieces, and then I am going to glue those onto this piece of plywood. That's gonna give us a really stable lid for our box. All right, now we can get this laminated up. I'm just gonna drench it with glue, line it up on the plywood on both sides, and clamp it down with some particle board that's gonna kind of serve as cauls for me. Same thing that we did with all the other glue ups. Just wanna make basically like a giant particle board sandwich. Just in case you're wondering, yes, this is ingrain and we are gonna glue it to the plywood. And typically, gluing ingrain doesn't work out too well. In this case, we have a ton of surface area. And we're not gluing ingrain to ingrain, we are gluing it to this plywood, which will accept it really, really well. The lid is done, so now we can actually work on the box. So those boards that I milled up the other day, I made sure they're acclimated to the shop and made sure that they're nice and flat and they are ready for joinery. So I'm gonna do miter joints for this box. I'm gonna put my blade at a 45-degree angle. I'm gonna use this old, nasty, repurposed sled. I'm gonna cut my joints and we can actually assemble this thing and see what it looks like. After I dry assembled the box, I went ahead and glued it up and let it dry overnight. So new day in the shop, and I was thinking it over. I really think this box needs maple splines. I've got all of this walnut surface area. You see the maple on the top. I plan on having a maple liner on the inside, but visually on the outside, I think it needs to have that contrast. So I'm gonna do splines. Now, if only there was a way for me to make splines. Oh wait, I have this jig. If you wanna learn how to make this jig, click up there. I go through the whole process. My splines turned out great, so I went ahead and cut the lid off of the box, and I really like the way this looks. So now I gotta flatten the lid and also the base. And to do that, I like to use this, which is a piece of plywood, and I put some sticky backed sandpaper. I think this is 120 grit. And then I grabbed one of those sanding discs from my disc sander and stuck it here on the bottom. So now when I put this on my workbench, it doesn't go anywhere. I can take my lid and I can go to circular patterns and sand it until it's flat and it makes nicely on my box. So I'm gonna do that, and then I'm also gonna work on a liner. So I wanna do a maple liner for this. I'm gonna leave the bottom of it walnut. That way whenever you take the lid off, you see that pop of maple, but then you see the contrast of the walnut down the bottom. Now it's time for one of my favorite parts of any project, which is applying that first coat of finish. This thing turned out amazing. I love the way it looks, especially that lid. I know the lid was intricate and it took us a long time to make it, but it was totally worth it. And also, I really like the decision to put the splines in the corners. Now that we have the lid with the box, it really feels like it needed that visual pop on the side, so I'm glad that's what we did. I tried to be really selective when it came to the materials for the box. I knew that the lid would be complicated visually, and I wanted to make sure it didn't outweigh the sides of the box. So I tried to find boards that had as much character and figure as possible. That way, visually, everything bounces out. I hope that you really like this project. I know I had a blast making it, and I'm hoping this video inspires you to get in your shop and make something similar. So if you like this sort of content, please consider subscribing to the channel and hit the like button on this particular video. Until we meet again, get in your shop and build something awesome.